나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Hello, everyone. Hello, friends. Thanks for being here. I hope this podcast finds you healthy and secure. I began speaking in the last video on the world of Buddha or Buddha-ness. And I mentioned the skandhas or khandas, depending on whether you're translating Pali or Sanskrit or ancient Chinese. Or to be sure, it's an Indian concept that Shakyamuni adopted from regular vernacular. He actually changed the definition of the word, as he did with karma and so many other words. And I'm looking for... So today, even though we're eventually going to get to the skandhas, we are, since we did a single video for each of the 10 worlds, the 10 life conditions, the 10 mental experiential compartments or types of experience that we define in our samsaric lives. Having a lot of trouble with my glasses this morning. I'm chomping at the bit, of course, because the 10 worlds is something we hear about a lot when we start practicing the doctrine of Nichiren, which is the doctrine of Tendai and Miaolo and Dengyo. It's not just Nichiren, but Nichiren really elucidates a lot of this doctrine, and quite frankly, most of the commentary that we have that's still extant and not lost to collectors or time is Nichiren's dialogues. So his Gosho are tremendous help in our understanding of the scholarship of Mahayana Buddhism, right? But we tend to, I think a lot of people tend to think that Nichiren was the only one who talked about this, and that in fact he created his own Buddhism. But the fact of the matter is that Buddhism is Shakyamuni's teachings, his realization, and his breadth of teachings, and a tremendous amount of scholarship has gone on over thousands of years by great bodhisattvas, students of Shakyamuni's work, and Nichiren is one of those. But he's not creating his own Buddhism. He never did. He never claimed to. His claim was to be a dedicated proponent of the ultimate of the Mahayana teachings of Shakyamuni's Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra. And in understanding and in service to that understanding of Lotus Sutra, Nichiren relies heavily on the scholarship of Tendai, Chiche, Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Tendai, of course, Chiche, Miaolo, Dengyo, and others. But those are the highlight areas that he elucidates. And in Tendai Chiche's breakdown of the concept of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life was a critical opening door to Shakyamuni's teachings about how our mental conditioning, reasoning, experiential devices of human samsaric life function to create the delusions and illusions that we experience constantly in samsara, the foundations of suffering. But also, we shouldn't forget that it is these very same attachments and classifications and our cravings and desire and identification of things, our specificity of things, that also can be used as a tool to help us to realize our Buddha mind, our potential understanding of this entire process of life that all phenomena are born of, created of, right? That all of it being an illusion, how does that illusion get constructed? And more to the point, how can we use those devices of samsara that normally would mislead us or lead us to disappointments, suffering, sickness, old age, death, all of that, and use them to help us to free ourselves from them, kind of reverse them. And this is the concept Nichiren dedicates a lot of talk, not a lot, but a specific talk to earthly desires being enlightenment. And this is what he's touching on. He's not saying that your love of, watching flowers bloom is your path to enlightenment. But he is saying that the mechanisms that you use as a human in samsara, your mental cognitive faculties that attract you, attach you, and savor flowers blooming, if they're directed toward enlightenment, can actually work toward your enlightenment. So use them, but use them in a specific way. And this is an important thing to realize, because this is a foundation of why we chant to this mandala to help us invoke and enlighten our minds to Buddhahood. We're actually using those functions of our samsaric mind, our human minds, to lead us to liberation from those very devices that create our suffering, to enlighten our mind. It's a very clever way of getting us to Buddhahood in the most direct, immediate fashion, by using the very function of samsara to liberate ourselves from it. Which is why I'm always saying to you that Buddhahood is only something you can experience in samsara. Because samsara is the state of experience. Do you see? Before you become a human, before the mind is created, or at death, when the mind goes away, there is no experience. So the only way you can experience Buddhahood or Buddha-ness, or that clarity of understanding the life process, the life of all phenomena, the nature of all phenomena, is while you're here in this samsaric reality. And rather than see that as a diminishment, you should see it as a tremendous opportunity. Buddhism essentially says, why are you living life as though it's a torture chamber that you'll only once you die be released from? Well, it's hard to argue with that. But why live your life that way? Isn't that the diminishment? Why live your life suffering? This is what inspired Siddhartha to begin his journey to attainment of clarity, Buddhahood. That's the whole reason for Buddhism. This life can be a beautiful, amazing experience. Why do we insist upon making it some kind of a purgatory? We're doing that. How can we stop doing that? What's the key to help us release our profound attachment to somehow beating ourselves up for being alive, creating all this suffering, looking for moments of exaltation that are so temporary they only enforce the suffering? There's got to be a better way to live this life to its maximal potential. To be awestruck by the fact that we're even experiencing this amazing thing we call humanity, human life, this planet, this universe. How many times have you looked through a telescope or into a microscope and been confronted with realities that are real, but that we don't normally think about, don't normally experience? And isn't that awestruck? When you look at an electron microscope image, oh man, that's going on right here and now? The nebula, the universes, the stars, the other planets, this planet, the moon. We're now able to look and analyze and experience those things. It's utterly amazing, isn't it? Fiddling with my collar again. And so Siddhartha Shakyamuni simply asked, how can we do something, create some mental exercise that would lead us away from this paradigm of suffering and instead to this paradigm of amazement? Because life is amazing. Why shouldn't we experience that completely? Isn't that the only reason to be here? Right? What are the big questions in life? Who am I? Why am I here? What's this all about? Right? The biggies. And Buddhism answers it. Answers all of them. That was the motivation for enlightenment in the first place. And Shakyamuni spent the rest of his life teaching, elevating people's understanding of what was going on here in samsara, to the point where he finally said, okay, so now here it is. This is how to live your life maximally. So the 10 worlds are aspects of our mental conditioning, how we tend to experience things, an entire range, a scope, from being completely downtrodden by our own perceptions to being completely released from those unreal illusions that we've made for ourselves. Right? The whole spectrum. And then, as we're reciting the second chapter in Gangyo, that last little section where we read Yui butsu yo butsu naino kujin shoho jizo shori shoho nyoze so noze sho noze tai noze riki noze, right? And we repeat that 3 times. Those are the 10 factors. So we're going to dig into that a little bit today, because that's one of the multipliers to get to 3,000 realms in a single moment. And I'm sure I'll be incapable of not going beyond that, because I think we can show by looking at the data now that there are actually 30,000 realms that we experience or go through mentally in each moment, moment to moment of life and death. The living moment, the dying moment, the living of the next moment, the dying of the next moment, so on and so forth. This is how we live our lives. This is how we create a timeline, right? What is a line? Remember geometry? It's a collection of loci, or loci, depending on how you want to say it. It's a connection of points. And what are points? Locations. They're not things. This is the illusion of time. Without time, we have no space. Without space, we have no time. Look at Roger Penrose's cyclical conformal cosmology model. It's brilliant if you're looking for a scientific basis for that reasoning. But so, the 10 factors. Now, so we have 10 worlds we've discussed. The 10 worlds have the other 10 mutually possessed within them. So there's a bodhisattva of anger and a hell, hunger, and animality of Buddhahood, and there's a Buddhahood of nin, of tranquility, and there's a rapturous component of animality and anger and learning and realization. And they mutate and go through each other. And we're constantly mixing all of these together. And it's important that you understand that these aren't singular places or singular things we do, that they're constantly all intermingled. Right? Resist the temptation to say, I'm in the world of anger. No. Just making that statement, you went through thousands of worlds. Not just individually, but together. See, these are ingredients in the samsaric salad. Right? You can say something tastes salty while also realizing that you taste the pepper and the other seasonings and the skin and the texture of the meat of the chicken and all of these things, but you identify that it's salty. That just means that the balance maybe of saltiness comes more to the foreground, but it's not just salt. So our experiences are like this. The mental functions are like this. They lean toward certain tendencies, but they're all in there. Do you see? And each, now, if that's 100 different realms, right? But each of those realms, as we identify in the part of Gangyo I just read, has what we call 10 factors. And just before we say that this can only be understood amongst Buddhas. So right away, you have to understand that these 10 factors aren't really obvious to you and I in samsaric human thinking, our experiences, but that these become apparent as you awaken your Buddha mind, your clarity. From that position, you can look upon the functions of the mind of samsara and see that there are these 10 factors. There's the appearance. Number 1, attributes of things discernible from the outside, such as color, form, shape, and behavior. All of those have rabbit holes to go down also. But from your Buddha-ness, you can see that everything that we distinguish, that we perceive, whether it be the form of something physically solid or gas, liquid, solid, or a mental habit or perception. I'm going to sneeze. I've been sneezing a lot this morning. Apologize. So everything, every distinction that we make has this factor of appearance, right? If it didn't have an appearance, we wouldn't know or perceive it individually. We wouldn't distinguish it. Likewise, as we distinguish something there, it has a nature. We see it as an inherent disposition or quality of a thing that cannot be discerned from the outside. In other words, that's a blue thing, but it's a cool blue. Now we've identified some aspect of blue that's particular to that blue that you can't tell just by the color blue, but that it has a sensation now we're ascribing to it that's cold. You see how this is building? Entity. It exists. We've identified it, therefore it is real. That's samsara to a T, right? But from our Buddha-ness, we see that objectively as the function of our delusions that ties us to any of the 100 different world states of the 100 worlds, right? Power. That's energy. And then the next thing, influence. How is that energy going to work? How is it working on my psyche, on everyone's psyche? How can I use it to affect and influence? All of this is going on in an instant, right? Internal cause. This thing that I'm perceiving in this fractional of a moment of the 30,000 realms mixed with all of the other worlds, it came to be not of itself, but of my mechanisms of perception. See, the Buddhism always comes back to self-responsibility because it's my mind perceiving this. And so that internal cause is something that's fed from my own set of causations, the skandhas, which we'll get to, our perceptive consciousnesses, putting together a particular need for an instantiation, an attachment to that blue relation. It's only a thing, and it's only blue, and it's only blue in the way that I see that is blue, and it only affects me and influences in the way that I have created for it to affect me in relation to other things. You can't distinguish something without having distinguished its environment. Again, very Buddhist. Nothing exists outside of its environs. The environment is just as much the same reality as the thing that's distinguished within it. Can a fish exist without also water? If there's no water, there really is no fish. Relation. Latent effect. How will all of this conjuring, as I carry it with me through my cognition and my human mind and store it and use it, how will it participate in every future moment I instantiate of everything? How will it pop up in the middle of that flower I was talking about earlier? And how will it affect with all of its bag of intent and relation and cause, and how will it change my perception of the flower, this blue? And when it does affect it, and I do inculcate a sensation of whatever else it is that this one specific thing is influencing, that will be the manifest effect of that long ago decision to instantiate and distinguish this particular cool blue with its own definitions, which ultimately came from me to begin with. And there's a consistency in that from beginning to end. And what's the consistency? That it's self-created. And because it's self-created, it never really dies because it's ephemeral. It's a creation of my own mind and perception. And so that's a very consistent attribute of samsaric worlds. So now we have 10 times 10 worlds times 10 factors. Now we're at 1,000. And the next thing we'll talk about is the 3 realms of existence. Something interesting that this is just talking about Tendai's elucidation of the way the mind works, and he created this concept of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. He was trying to explore Shakyamuni's teachings, again, of how the mind works and how it works so well to fool us into thinking that something is real that is only ephemeral, that is a very in flux, changing constantly, moment to moment. But the mind, the human mind, the samsaric mind, is extremely clever in creating a reality for us to live in. And for myriad reasons, that reality seems to always amount to attachments that provide for us the opportunity to be amazed, and yet human beings use that opportunity to inferiorize themselves, to become subject to the reality instead of understanding that we create the reality. You see, we are the creators. And we have all this amazing perceptive ability to experience fully, joyfully, this experience, and we spend so much of our time instead being tortured by it. What the hell are we doing? And so this is the entire enlightenment of Shakyamuni, is that we don't have to do, you can stop doing that. You can change your mind. Reality will remain the same, but you will experience it from a completely different point of view. And once you experience that point of view, suddenly you will realize that all of those multitudes that are not realizing how awesome and an amazing life is will move you to do something. Sometimes to tears, sometimes to laughter, but you will be deeply affected, moved. Once you know, once you experience this freedom, the strong sense of bringing other people to make this realization for themselves, it's overwhelming. That's the compassion of Buddhism. right? Strictly enlightenment, compassion. And when people complain, we can feel sadness. But the sadness isn't about the situation they're describing that's making them sad. The sadness is about them not understanding that they are creating their own suffering. That's a very different way to feel affected and sad about somebody's predicament. It's not that you ridicule them for not knowing any better. It's that you understand the depth of their illusion and the amount of work required in order to release them from it. We know because we had to do it. And we continue to have to do it. And that, my friends, is the Bodhisattva path, the Bodhisattva way. Attaining the Buddha mind is the highest form of the Buddha way. The maximal compassion, if you will. Right? The exigency that you feel at a cellular level to please release that suffering from yourself. You don't need to do that. Let me give you some tools. Let me show you the way. Even though these samsaric words and methods are just so lacking, but somehow let me take you to this oasis of gorgeous beauty and amazement that is the Buddha mind. Right? That's the Bodhisattva way. We're all learning to perfect that Bodhisattva way in ourselves, for ourselves. How more samsaric could you be? The irony is that once you achieve it, even a little bit, you transcend yourself. Because once you awaken the mind, you see that the self is the primary illusion. We're a set of tendencies and conditions, right? We're a circumstance. That doesn't deny that we exist. It's not annihilating. That's not nihilism. That's a recognition of the power of the mind that we have and how we can use it to amazing results. There's no greater justification for life itself. Human life especially, because that mind is the mind that can see purely, without attachments, without defilements. Yeah? All right. I want to go right into the three realms, and that's going to take me right into the five aggregates, or composites, or humps, heaps, piles. Remember, I was talking about where the origin of the word khandhas and how it didn't mean at all what Buddha came to assign to it, psychological assignment to it. He was struggling with the nature of words too. And on that note, heaps and piles of thanks to you for participating, for listening in. For those of you who can contribute, either in commentary or in funding or accoutrement, candles, incense, whatever. Anything you can do to support this effort is immensely appreciated by all of us, not just me. But certainly your support, whether it's in contribution or just participating in the comments, is deeply gratifying to me personally. So thank you. And with that, I can hardly wait to see you guys in the next one. All right? In the meantime, please be kind to yourself and therefore your environs. Keep up your practice. You're doing great. It's phenomenal. And I will see you in the next video, podcast, whatever we call it. Like, subscribe, share. You know the drill. Thanks again. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.